Howdy everyone, my name is Avram Plager and welcome back to my Fusion 360 tutorials for CAD design. So I do apologize for the lapse in videos that I've been publishing. I did have exams and those did take up a lot of my time, but I should be back for a good bit. Today at the behest of a requester, I'm going to be detailing how to make pipe notching, which is creating basically patterns in pipes that allow you to attach them to each other. This is prominent in welding, and then in addition to that, I'll be detailing how to make standard items like iron beams, channel beams, and I-beams. So let's begin. So you do have a command in Fusion 360 called pipe, but to use pipe you do need a path to begin. So to start, we'll create a component. We'll just keep it as component 1, then we'll say OK. And I'll create a sketch on the YZ plane, and then we'll just create a line that goes from the 100mm line down to the 50mm line, and this will be a 50mm line. And actually, if you want, you can put this down 60mm to give us a little bit longer tube, and then click your check mark, and then say finish sketch. Now we'll go up and we can either use the command in here or we can use the hotkey over here. And once you open up the pipe command, you can select this path here. Now you'll see it'll automatically give us a dimension for the diameter and everything else. And we want to keep the section sizes circular because we want this to be a pipe. But our section size we want to be 40mm. And we want it to be hollow, and we want the section thickness to be 1.5mm. Now we'll set this as new body, and we'll say OK. And make sure that when you click this body, it does pop up under component 1. Now what we'll do is we'll go and we'll create another component, but we need to remember to set the body to our workspace, the parent, sorry, to our workspace, and say OK. Now we need to create another tube. So we'll go to our create sketch function and we'll go on the YZ plane. And then what we'll do is we'll go back into the right view and we'll select a center diameter circle. And we'll go actually with a line from -75 all the way 167mm out. And we can actually make this 180 just for a standard measurement, and we'll say enter. Then we can move this around a little bit just to give us some more flexibility in where this is positioned. Make sure it's on the x-axis, and then say finish sketch. Now I'll create another pipe that's along this path, but the section size needs to be about 60mm or go up until the pipe actually intersects the other pipe that we have there. So we'll go up to 100mm, and we can see that that intersects. So now we'll set this as new body. We'll set it as hollow, make sure the section thickness is 1.5. Then we'll say OK. Now that we know the diameter of this is 100mm, we'll hide this component, activate our first component, and then create another sketch on the YZ plane, which is a center diameter circle of diameter 100mm. Say enter, and then say finish sketch. Now we need to extrude this, and on the direction you want to say 2 sides. Extrude this out to one side, and then out to the other. And now you should have a cut function similar to that, and say OK. Now we can show our other component. And if we activate our workspace, we can see there were some orientation issues, and we can solve that by going into our component 1, selecting this body, right-clicking, saying move or copy, and then rotating along the y-axis 90 degrees. And then we can say OK. Now with that done, you want to check and make sure that the line at the bottom of this tube here is showing on all places. So now we have that. This will create a flush connection between these two cylinders. Once we have that, we will hide our second cylinder, that is the larger tube. And we'll actually put a small bevel on the outside edge of this. So what you're going to do that is you're going to select the outside edge, go up to your modify toolbar and select fillet or fillet, or however you want to pronounce it. I'm not exactly sure what the pronunciation on that is, but I prefer to pronounce it fillet. And you can put this as 0.5. This will create a nice fillet that will give you a nice aesthetic appeal, but it won't disturb the appearance too much. Don't change anything else, and then say OK. Now we can show our other component again. You can see there's a little bit of lifting there, which is good, especially if you go to weld these two components together and you want them to connect. This is a very good technique because it allows you to have some space between the first tube and the second tube where you can put some welding material in. If you wanted to connect these two tubes, what you would do is you would make another sketch along the XZ plane, but before you do that, you need to construct an offset plane from that XZ plane that's going to go up, and it's just going to rest on the top of this cylinder here at 50 millimeters. And at 50 millimeters, you can see that that plane is tangent to this first cylinder. Now we'll say OK. And then we'll create a sketch along that plane. And what that'll allow us to do is create a center diameter circle at the center here, out to the inner diameter here, which, if we remember, we set this to be 40 millimeters. And we know that the thickness is 1.5. So do 40 minus 3, which is 37 millimeters, which is going to give us the edge of the inside edge of that cylinder. Then we'll say enter, and we'll say finish sketch. Now we need to extrude that sketch, and the start is going to be from an object. The object that we're going to select is our body here, and the profile is going to be our circle there. We want this to be a cut function, and immediately when we scroll that down, it'll set as a cut function. Make sure you have this cut all the way, and then select OK. Now with that, you can see we have a hole cut on the inside here that goes flush to our first tube that we have set up. It's a circular hole that goes along the curved path there. We have some material that we can put in there, and this is all flush, and that is a good way to do pipe notching in Fusion 360. There's not a specific algorithm that you can use, as far as I know, to do pipe notching. It really is a little bit of eyeballing and a little bit of knowing a certain technique to do it. And with that, we'll move on to creating some standard objects. The requester did specify iron beams, channel beams, and I-beams. Iron beams are basically just right angle beams that extend out. Channel beams are basically a U-shaped pipe or kind of a half box shaped pipe that has an open top. And then I-beams are basically shaped like the capital letter I in the English language, and then that's just extended out. So to begin, we'll create a new component, and we need to remember to always select our parent to our workspace unless we're creating subcomponents. And then we'll say OK. Now we'll create a sketch along our XZ plane, and we'll go out a bit. And again, you can move where you are in your work plane while you're doing a sketch. So that will actually create two 2-point rectangles. And we'll make these not terribly big, and we'll just set them. The width needs to be 5 millimeters, and the length can be 150 millimeters. And then we'll say enter. Now we need to create a replica of this, so we'll create another 2-point rectangle. We'll set this at the base of that. We'll set the length to be 150 and the width to be 5. Then we'll press enter. Now what we need to do is we need to trim the inside of those two sketches where they intersect. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to go in, zoom in on those two sketches, and we'll use our trim tool, and we'll just highlight over those two edges there. Now we'll say finish sketch, and we'll actually use our extrude function, very easy and simple, and we'll just extrude this upward. This can go as far as you need. We can make this even up to 600 millimeters, or 700 millimeters is fine there. We'll say new body, and we'll say OK. Now, one thing that's common with a lot of these beams is that they have a softer inner edge, and the way we can do that is we can select that edge, use a fillet, and set that to 0.5. And then we'll say OK. This gives us just barely a smooth edge on the inside there, and you can do that all around, but this is essentially what a channel beam is. Not a very complex shape at all. And now if you'd like, what you can do is you can either use this object to make a channel beam, or you can make a new channel beam. What I want to do is I want to create basically a replica of this. So we'll create another sketch along the XZ plane, sorry. We'll go out a little bit, and we'll go again to our top view, and we'll create a 2-point rectangle. We want this to be 150 by 5, so we'll set that to 5, and this to 150. We'll say enter. Now we'll zoom in a bit so we have some easier viewing capabilities. Then we'll create another 2-point rectangle going along 150 by 5. Press enter, and then create the final 2-point rectangle 5 by 150, and press enter. Now use the trim feature to trim away those inside edges. And don't worry about the errors that you get. Those will come up just in standard operation, because Fusion 360 doesn't really know what we're doing. And one thing that you're seeing here is a disorientation of your viewing port. The way to solve that is just to go back to your home view and then zoom back in. This does happen frequently, and honestly, no matter how well trained you are in Fusion 360, it does happen to the best of us. So if you do encounter an error like what just happened, just remember, go back to your home view, and then go from there. Now with that, we can finish our sketch, and then we can extrude. Our profile is automatically selected. We'll just extrude this upward. And like the same thing over here to 700 millimeters. I will say OK. Now we can bevel both the inside edges at the same time by selecting this edge here, and then shift and clicking on the other edge. Now use your fillet tool and go out to 0.5 millimeters. And then say OK. Now you can see on both our inside edges, we have fillets. Now we'll create the I-beam. The I-beam is a little bit more complex of an object, but it's still a very standard object that's easy to do. And so we'll just start again by creating another sketch on the XZ plane. Go out to the right. Again, make sure you're on your top view. Now you're going to want to create a 2-point rectangle. And you want to give yourself a little bit of space here. Now place the first corner there. Make sure the length is to 400 millimeters. And the width is to 10 millimeters. And press enter. Now you're going to want to make sure you're always on your top view and well zoomed in for this part. Now you want to trim this edge here. And you want to create 2 lines. Going down at a very, very shallow angle of about 3 degrees is what you want, or 3.5 degrees. But we want the length to be out to the midpoint here. So we'll go here and we'll set this to 3.5. And we'll undo this because it did get a little bit malformed. That's easy to fix. We'll just go again and make sure the angle again is set to 3.5 degrees. And then go out to the midpoint, which will automatically, if you have snap set on your sketch palette, it'll automatically snap to the center there. And then you just go back up to this point here, and that'll make an exact replica. Now we want to create a rectangle going down. So we'll create a 2-point rectangle that's on this point, and then we'll go out and down. And you want to go down all the way to the base here. And then we need to fix some errors here. And sometimes you do need to switch between respective viewing capabilities. You want to switch between pan and zoom when you're making specific viewing corrections. You can close the sketch palette for now. But what we want to do is set the width between these 2 points. So we'll create a sketch dimension between these of about 35 millimeters. And we'll say enter. Now with that 35, we know that we want the distance between these 2 points to be 17.5 millimeters. So between the corner point here and this point here, we want it to be 17.5 millimeters. And we'll say enter. Now we know that this is centered. And we always want this to be along this line, which is fine. It will automatically select when we did our initial sketch. Now we can go back to our top view and zoom out a little bit. Then pan around. Make sure that everything is how you'd like it to be. And now what we can do is we can select this object here, say move or copy, or just go and say Control C and Control V on your keyboard, and that should make a copy. If it doesn't, what you can do is you can just make an individual face of itself. And all we're going to do is just repeat the process that we did previously. Fusion 360 is still going through some updates recently, so some features that may have been available before are not available anymore. But that's really not a problem because you can just do everything by hand. So now again, we'll create a 2-point rectangle, 400 millimeters on the width. And then 10 millimeters on the length. And then press enter. Then make sure you delete the bottom face here. Make sure you delete all 3 sections. Because we have this rectangle here, it's going to want to split that up into 3. Now you need to create a line. It's going to go to the midpoint there. And make sure that you set the angle to 3.5 degrees. And then shift this out until it snaps to the center. If this is not snapping to the center, all you need to do is press escape and then create the line, and instead of creating the angle first, go out to the center and then set the angle to 3.5 degrees, and then it'll automatically snap again. Now say that, and then create a line back to that initial point over there. Then press escape to exit out of that tool. Now we need to trim off the edges here so that we have all of a flat shape. Make sure again that you trim off the edges in all places that are on the inside because we want this to be just one face here. Now open up your sketch palette and say finish sketch. And now we can extrude this outwards. So we'll take this and we'll extrude it out 700 millimeters like our other shapes. And we'll say OK. Now you can see you have some standard shapes set up. You have an I-beam, you have a channel beam, you have an iron beam, and then if we activate all of our components, we have the pipe notching, the pipe notching is honestly one of my favorite things to do. It's really cool to see pipes line up like that. But with that, I hope y'all liked my tutorial. This really is a display. I really love to teach. And if y'all ever want a video commissioned or anything, it is completely free of charge. I don't ask for money. I don't ask for donations. But if you really want to, if you'd like a video, feel free to comment down below. Message me on MeWe or email me about a video that you'd like, and I'd be happy to commission it for you. Thank y'all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.